Welcome back to some more World End Economica. So I had to re-record this. Plus it's been a long while since I picked this back up. And as you can see, they've really updated some more into the game. So instead of like no option to pause or something, you gotta right click and save and all that such. I mean, the little layout is kind of interesting, but other than that, and they got a little backlog to read instead of like scrolling back up. Apparently, like if I do anything, then it's too late. So let's be careful on that one. Anyway, let's continue reading. Despite going to Soralt's store and sleeping early, my fatigue built up steadily day by day. I had no idea just what was wrong. All I knew was that whenever I thought about trading, I'd feel lethargic and depressed. Perhaps the number of stocks I had to trade in order to retain the same level of performance with increased funds was a bit too much. Or perhaps I was feeling the burden of having people's fates placed upon me more so than I had anticipated. After finishing morning trading, I was slumped over the table, having left unfinished the lunch Lisa prepared for me before she headed out for the Chinese restaurant. Once again, Chinese food is good. Are you alright? Agata said that to me during the break. She wasn't used to saying things like that, and thus her voice was faltering. No, let me rest. Even when I closed my eyes, trading screens flickered in my vision, and there was a dull pain in my head. I thought maybe it was a cold, but it didn't feel like that. Besides a cold, there were other things I could be suffering from. Before now, no matter how tired I got from trading, all I needed was a good night's rest before I was ready and pumped for more action. However, that stopped being the case. Now, when I'd wake up, I'd feel annoyed that I had to trade again today. Perhaps it was a reaction to having made too much money, something I hadn't done for a while. Perhaps it was something similar to the initial euphoria and eventual boredom one would get by cheating in a video game. If so, then it was simply a lifestyle disease in my mind. If I continued to pile on the profits, not only would I be able to save a lot of people, but I'd also be able to go to fantastic places. Trading too much? At that point, Hagana again talked to me. I looked up because her words piqued my interest. And if it was too much, what would you do? My wording came off as irritated because there was nothing that could be done with all these funds without carefully making lots of trades, like usual. I haven't an idea. I reacted so much that I surprised even myself. Not only did I look up, but my body got up as well. Hagana was sitting on a chair, staring this way. What? We could just automate the trading for the investment contest. No words. I stared at Hagana's face. It was simple and a ridiculously clear solution. When I talked to Soralt, he took what we already had, extended it, and quickly made a new program. Backtesting showed that while it couldn't really touch you, it was making clean gains. Hagana opened the program on her terminal and showed me the test results. I squinted at the numbers and frowned with a dull headache. The displayed numbers had pluses and minuses flying around everywhere. Since it wasn't able to read the mood of the market like me, there were big losses and the total performance was only a third of mine. Despite that, the fully automated program was clearly making gains. Gains, huh? Hell, right now you look really bad. You don't say. When I lifted my face up from the terminal, Hagana was staring at me emotionlessly. I didn't need words to know that her poker face hid actual worry for me. Performance dropped, but with this, you could concentrate on the real market. Hagana's eyes were serious. Even if I relegated the investment contest to second priority, I still couldn't totally leave it alone. Now I felt like the contest and the real market was starting to not be compatible with each other. And thus, if something had to be cut, Hagana would certainly decide on the investment contest. This insightful observation was certainly implausible, but Hagana's eyes said that she truly was worried about me. However, I couldn't help but lower my eyes in response to that suggestion. An investment program would replace me. One reason I pondered over that was because the performance would degrade. If Barton were looking at the trading history, there was the possibility that he'd give up on me.
However, the biggest reason was something much clearer. I was not needed, and with that realization, I felt a chill in the pit of my stomach. I finally saw the pit trap in front of me that I had totally not noticed at all. The performance could be improved with some work. However, Hal, Lisa is also worried about you, so don't need it. I cut off Hagana's words and replied, don't need it, I'll handle both. Hagana was about to say something. However, I quickly interrupted her with my words. Mr. Trosh, in first place, had made a ridiculous amount of money. With this program, we wouldn't be able to catch up. It was seemingly sound reasoning, and it was the truth. However, the real reason was different. Besides, I wasn't trying to deny that I was putting the contest in the back burner, and thus I was concerned about one thing. Increase in performance? If anyone could do it, Hagana could. The program had been steadily getting better. However, I couldn't improve at the same speed as the program. One day it would catch up to me. And when that time came, what would I do? That's a good question. Why don't you go and find some easier stocks to profit off of or something? Yeah, concentrate on increasing the volatility, yeah. All extract gains of that. Wasn't that our original division of labor? Hagana's brows bent, showing a bit of pain on her part. I couldn't tell if she was being worried about me or not. What I did understand was that I had somehow found myself in a bad situation. Well, you're definitely in a bad situation at that one. You're unmotivated as hell. What if Hagana's program were to fully be able to copy everything I could do and became fully automated? Right now, my processing power was limited as I was just a human being. What I had first joked about has started feeling more realistic. In fact, there was the possibility that the program would surpass me. When that time came, how much value would I add to Barton? And how much would I be worth to Hagana? Furthermore, I couldn't just reject cooperation from Hagana at this point. Chris's family couldn't pay off their debts right now. I couldn't push her away. And thus, my choices were limited. I'll continue to do my best until the end of the contest. There were 2 weeks remaining in the contest. There's nothing that couldn't be endured. There's nothing that couldn't be faked over. Facing Hagana, who was hesitating on agreeing, I made my move, ignoring the moral implications. So please, lend me a hand. Hagana shrank nervously but nodded strongly. She didn't appear to be the Hagana who thought that she couldn't do anything. Right now we had collected a lot of money, and whether those people could pay off their debts rested with us. What I had said to her was the ultimate move. However, it was ironic. The more I relied on Hagana's help, the more my power waned. Being unable to smile even when making heaps of money, I finally realized where my fatigue was coming from. What I was doing now was nothing different from mere work. I stopped getting up early to read the news and stopped staring at the stocks after trading. I wasn't using the program to make money. It was painful because I had simply been relegated into the program's ultimate component. However, even if that were the case, I had to continue this way. Furthermore, I had to protect my standing. Before managing to secure the top spot in the contest and heading over to Schrodinger Street, whatever you pronounce it, I had to think of it as myself trading. Alright, afternoon's trading about to start. I made my short proclamation and handed the terminal back to Hagana. I was about to start another round of simple work. I had to endure it, and I had to hide my true feelings from Hagana. The investment contest entered the final stretch, and Mr. Trosh must have used some sort of rocket fuel to send his numbers soaring into the 92 million wool mark. There was no longer any doubt that he was putting his leverage into full tilt via margin trading. I believed it would be absurd to be able to put out this level of performance without using margin. Besides, the contest had entered the final stretch with everyone starting to engage in massive speculation, and thus the stock price movements became more chaotic. One after another, people started making lots of profit. Even I had reached the 55 million wool mark, but that was only 5th place. Before, I had only been doing a little bit of margin trading here and there, but now I had removed the safeties and was using them constantly to my fullest extent. This was supposed to be bumping my leverage, but I felt unresponsive in front of the computer. This wasn't a matter of performance, but rather my spirits. The more money we made, the more Hagana became absorbed in her formulas, and the more she became absorbed in her formulas, the more the program improved. Thus, it started to show more and more how there was no longer a place for me. These past days, I started not being able to tell whether a stock was a good stock or not stock from the list. Sorry about that. I don't know why I feel sleepy on that one. I could figure out whether something wasn't half bad, and I could figure out whether I liked the stock. However, I couldn't figure out anything beyond that. It felt like there was a veil thrown over my eyes. I wondered if Barton was looking at the training records. He could be. There hadn't been any correspondence from him since then, so perhaps he had given up on a foreign fellow like me after seeing the results. It was because Barton had called out to me after looking at the initial big gambles I had made. He probably had no interest in a fifth-place person like me, who could only pick up those loose change here and there. It was said that this Mr. Troche was a super elite who graduated from Harvard with an MBA and had been formally offered employment with Blatina Smith. Why would someone be able to retain interest in me when there was someone like that out there? That's what I want to know. However, there was no mistake that what we've accomplished was helping a lot of people. And it wasn't just those people burdened with loans that I was talking about. Hagana gained confidence from our success and started looking more like a real live human being. She had mellowed out unbelievably since we met, and she even sometimes became bashful. Lisa was happy about that above all else. On the other hand, I felt something heavy gradually building up in my gut. I'd act out, nearly venting from time to time, but Lisa supported me, saying it was because I was worn out from training. However, I knew that wasn't the reason. In order to not have my position taken over by Hagana's program, I had to be desperate. I couldn't express that what I was doing was irreplaceable except through my attitude and actions. I was afraid that Hagana would seriously start working on the automated program if I didn't do that. Starting around then, I started waking up in the middle of the night from a nightmare. In it, with each answer I give to Hagana, my body started changing more and more into formulas. Like a jigsaw puzzle not fitting together, my body would collapse into a pile of Greek letters. I'd frantically tried to collect them, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't turn them back into my original body. During times like breakfast, Hagana was unbelievably courteous and would hand me a spoon or the sugar. However, I was starting to believe that it was some sort of intentional harassment, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. Right when I was about to cry from being driven to the limit, I received an email from Barton. I made some time, so could we meet? Sorry, but if we could start in the morning, then that'd be great. The appointed date was a normal working day. Going out during trading was outrageous, but there were days before I teamed up with Hagana where I stopped trading and stare off into space, on rainy days, for example. Clinging to this email as a last ray of hope, I replied, "We could meet." The response came back quickly as expected, and it pointed out the Royal Central Hotel where we met before. When I told Hagana that I was going to leave mid-morning on a trading day, she was more confused than shocked. "What would you do about the trading?" she asked the obvious question. Now, it's obvious, ain't it? I had already decided on my reply. Couldn't I just rest a day? Hagana's eyes flew open in shock at my words, but Hagana couldn't do the trades by herself, and we couldn't rely on an automatic program. "Are you sure about that? Why don't you get some rest too? Weren't you staying up late recently?" "Okay." Hagana nodded and didn't say anything else. I thought she was going to be mad or something. The night before I was about to meet Barton, I couldn't really sleep much. In the back of my mind was my meeting with Barton and the glimpses of the gorgeous night scenes of Newton City. I took the same route to the Grand Central Hotel as I did 2 weeks before and was led to the back of the cafe again. And just like last time, I made him pause and smile. "You look terrible." But those words were different this time. Barton ordered me a hot chocolate liquor. When I drank it, I felt like I was about to cry uncontrollably. Barton sat his massive self down across from the coffee table with his elbow on the armrest and his finger at his temple. Of course, he was observing me, but I was obviously looking transparent to him. While I felt a little embarrassed, I somehow also felt a bit at home. Some people condemn people for being wasteful and extravagant when those people say living was hard when they were successful. Suddenly, Barton spoke. Those condemnations are the words of losers who had never succeeded before. It's likely they don't understand that the world is like that, no matter how hungry you were. If someone were to ram food down your throat, it'd be painful for you. Barton said those words while looking at the coffee cup he had just sipped from. I saw your performance in the investment contest. How good or how bad the numbers come out sometimes depends on luck. Getting stuck isn't bad per se, but... He burped and continued. Sorry. Well, it's gotten boring. I almost dropped my cup. What happened in the beginning felt like almost another person. Of course, your investment methods and selection of stocks are inconsistent right now, but from a more fundamental point of view, well, it looks like just repetitive labor. Barton set down his cup and leaned forward, looking at me. His eyes felt like they would pierce through to the truth and be able to see the unpredictable future clearly. Say, mister, you haven't involved someone else in your investing, have you? My hand trembled, spilling the chocolate liquor. However, I didn't move at all from that position. I just couldn't bring myself to say that I wasn't intentionally trying to hide it. However, if two people were involved in the investments, then the performance would have resulted from two people. Despite that, here was just me by myself. Furthermore, floating amongst this boiling sea of profits, how much could I say I was responsible for? And with all my frantic efforts to prevent being replaced by a program, had they all simply eroded my current standings? I stared down at my cup, not being able to look up. Barton continued, Did you think I was going to ask you to bring this other person? What he said was exactly what I was worried about. It would have been a quant in any case, right? What? I looked up instantly. There was an expression on his mature and dignified face like he'd eaten something bad. Looks like I was right. Teaming up with a math geek quant would do that. But that quant was responsible for most of the profits now. Barton held out his palm to prevent me from saying anything further. Quants are terrific creatures, and if you consider that being brilliant, then they certainly are. They model the market using math, and in most cases, they can turn a human's trading methods into formulas. Damn. He is one hell of a good lecturer. Barton flat out said what exactly was happening to me. Are you perhaps the sly type of investor who nibble at a stock here and there, making careful profits while trying to find the next big wave to ride? Well, that is one hell of a strategy to use in most cases. Yes. And that's something beautiful. The quick rises and falls of the stock market are, after all, most likely caused by humans. It's a lump of irrationality that can't be expressed by formulas, and is something that could only be felt by humans. He was talking about the mood, something I couldn't get Hagan to understand despite all my attempts at explaining. In this era, human labor is gradually being replaced by work done by machines. The fight is here, and you can't run away from it. He poked at his temple lightly. To win, there are only two ways. Either you become someone who can make machines, or you continue doing things machines can't do. Things machines can't do. That's right. I had called that to you before because I thought you'd have the talent to do something like that from just looking at your opening moves. People's thoughts are not something that could be turned into formulas. Being able to see through to them beyond the data and outward appearances is a talent. Barton was leaning over at me, staring at me while talking. For example, that quant you're working with, what do you think? Does that quant possess the talent to be able to see through to people's inner thoughts? Those words, I instantly had Hagan in my head. There was one thing Hagan was bad at. It was seeing through to people's thoughts and considering their feelings. There aren't many quants like that, unable to do so. They've even showed this to a degree in neurology. It's not easy to develop the brain in all these different directions after all. More specifically, being able to handle all these numbers is a very specialized skill. These math maniacs who'd be able to work as quants to make money are mostly people who would use their brains for math too much and have a lot of issues trying to deal with other people. This includes people who simply don't want to deal with other people because it'd be a bother. Isn't that some kind of flaw? Just think of a math professor wearing a white lab coat and glasses. They are definitely strange people. I was very familiar with what Barton was saying. Hagan's thoughts were usually very straightforward, just like math. If A equals B and B equals C, then A would have to be equal to C till the end of time. No buts about it. Thus, thinking of things like selling yourself to solve the debt issue, Hagan's methods were always pretty extreme. These are the effects of having been steeped too long in math, and the reward for that prize was talent in math. This math thing that Quants uses is a universal tool. Everyone's using the same tools to compete, so even if you came up with the best way, eventually someone would be able to mimic you. It's a fiercely competitive world out there, and being that, there's no guarantee of reward. Permanently maintaining first is something that's impossible from the get-go. Everyone's experimenting by trial and error, hoping to do well, thus they'll all eventually come across the same methods. With everyone doing the same thing, obviously you couldn't make money. Half a year, or perhaps just a few months later, you'd suddenly stop doing as well as you had before. Even in your own situation, when you're trying to carefully pick stocks, haven't you hit a wall before? Catching the mood of the market and doing short-term trades outside of those highly volatile situations is the same as what a quant is doing after all. I couldn't count how many times I had gasped. It was like being able to see everything in a new light from the sidelines. Before I had teamed up with Hagana, my trades had suddenly stopped working as well. Even though I had been doing the same thing, I couldn't obtain the same level of performance. That was probably because someone else managed to figure out the same tactics I've been using. I guess that's what happened, but it was careless to consider working with a quant. Anyone trading on intuition and reflexes would start wanting the seal of approval of science. However, relying on science doesn't solve any problems. In the end, you're all doing the same thing. Therefore, if you want to be a human who can surpass the machines, you'd have to think about problems as a human. Trying to make money in the irrational atmosphere when stocks are either rising or falling rapidly is one way. Quants assume people are rational and model the market that way, and therefore it's useless in situations wherein people are being irrational. Furthermore, humans are usually irrational. Isn't stuff like romance pretty much like that? Barton was smiling with satisfaction, but I could only give an unsure nod. Well, wasn't thinking it was okay to give Lisa 50,000 moles in exchange for sleeping on her lap the epitome of... Wait a minute. Well, wasn't thinking it was okay to give Lisa 50,000 moles in exchange for sleeping on her lap the epitome of your irrationality? Oh no, you tell me. Though it's true that everyone have times when they start wanting to turn to science, so I'm not laughing at you. For economists, both past and present, once they open their mouth, nothing but formulas comes out. Most likely it's because they feel that they wouldn't be accepted as real science without throwing formulas in. However, even doing that doesn't free them from their fears. Put simply, they're simply avoiding the things they can't compute. Nietzsche, whatever you pronounce the word, once said that the secret to science was the true fear of things that cannot be computed. In order to overcome machines, humans must get close to things that cannot be computed, and the only people who can do that, Barton flicked his suspenders and said in a teasing tone, are those who can look through to what the other person is thinking. In front of Barton, all I could do was to listen. It took all my effort to try to understand him, and it would be strange to say I really understood him. However, I knew that he was saying something very important. I've dreamed many times that my body was turning into Greek letters. At this rate, I stopped being necessary. Therefore, I had to do something that Hagana wouldn't be able to. I swallowed my saliva and asked Barton in a trembling voice, would I be able to do that? In front of me, Barton first frowned at me. It isn't a question of whether you can do it or not. To survive, your only choice is to do it well. I felt like I'd heard this phrase somewhere before. What a terribly powerful phrase, I thought to myself. I nodded slowly. Furthermore, I don't just idle around. I call out to people who have a chance of doing it, and on that point, your sense of smell had already been demonstrated. One of the reasons I had called you out to come here during the morning of a training day was that. Barton finished up the remaining coffee in his cup, set it down on the table, and then grabbed his jacket from the sofa next to him. I want to show you an outline of how I trade. Since he had a large frame, I felt even the atmosphere around him move when he got up. Barton stood up imposingly and looked over at me. Let's go. Those were powerful words, like a hero leading the lost. Barton drove himself this time. The car didn't feel any less expensive, but it wasn't something that you'd recognize instantly as a high-class luxury car. I was a bit lost because the car looked like it would get lost instantly among the other cars on the street. Come right shotgun. Following Barton's directions, I sat myself down up front. It's always a hard decision about what car to use for work. In the cramped driver's seat, the full-figured Barton drove the car with strong and solid turns on the steering wheel. It has to be not too fancy and not too junky. Why? The only way to surpass machines is to look into people's inner thoughts. Barton replied with a teasing tone. In other words, figure it out yourself. Okay, let me speed up the text speed a bit. A car for work. Turning this phrase over in my head, the answer suddenly occurred to me. If it's too shoddy looking, they'd think you didn't make very much money. Barton was the head of an investment fund. Customers entrusted money to the fund, and the fund would use that money and take a slice of their profits. If people weren't the type to entrust money to us while desperately trying to repay their loans, then they'd probably prefer trusting their money to a fund manager in a luxury car instead of someone in a broken-down car. That's correct, and why shouldn't it be too luxurious? I don't know. Because it gives it away? Barton replied without taking his eyes off the road. I frantically tried to come up with an answer. However, a clear reason wasn't coming to mind. It would perhaps make people hate you? Hate me? Well, I suppose there's that. The car made a right at an intersection. Newton City was multi-layered, thus most places have roads separate from pedestrian paths. Newton City, as seen from car lanes, looked different from a pedestrian's point of view. Actually, it's kind of a line of defense. Defense? Yeah, as long as there are times when a fund makes money, there will be times when it loses money. It's even more true the longer a fund has been around. Therefore, if you can normally go around a luxury car, then it becomes much harder to justify during times of loss. Therefore, a car for work had to be not too high class and not too cheap. Thus, a luxury car focused on practicality is best to relax in. I understood his point. Well, such a thing comes easily when you do it yourself. Besides, there's something else we should be looking at. The car descended into a lower level, exited the highway, and came out in a corner of the administrative sector. This area not only housed the Lunar University campus, but it also was home to drug companies, biotech companies, and many other companies making huge revenues on intellectual property. Among the companies around here, which one's financial reports have you looked at? Barton asked me while the car sped through tree-lined classy streets after having come back onto the upper layers. Barton had both hands on the steering wheel and looked around at the buildings outside, as if he was trying to find someone he was scheduled to meet. I searched through my memories at once. The companies around here were obviously among the main stocks in the street. Among the main stocks in the market. Rupert Pharmacy, Hut, Totska Holdings, Ring Tech, Amin Biotechnology, and you're great being able to come up with just these instantly. Furthermore, all of them have great finances. I could recommend them even to old widows. I see. However, looking at finance reports and graphs of stock prices will only net you conclusions that even a program could make. Even signs of embellishment and accounting fraud could be picked up mechanically if you had the know-how. It's because they could all be represented with well-known logic and numbers. Did you know that you can use statistics to find invalid records and ledgers? Huh? You just have to look at the statistical distribution of digits for the first digit and all the numbers. From that, you could determine whether there was something fishy. I had no idea what he was talking about. Me neither. From my vague knowledge, the digits on a ledger were random as if you rolled the dice. In other words, the numbers 1 through 9 would appear with equal probability. Accounting firms use it to expose inappropriate management. Statistically speaking, in normal situations, the first digit tends to be 1, about 30% of the time. They call it Benford's Law. No words on that. I thought that couldn't be right, but no words came out of my mouth. The math is a bit difficult, but if you look at logarithmic graphs, you'll be able to see it. And this type of stuff is child's play for quants. Barton sat himself up, stepped on the gas a bit, and entered a narrow street. And then he stopped over by the shoulder and nodded over at a building nearby. Wow, talk about a skyscraper right there. This is the building where Ring Tech is housed. Doesn't it look magnificent? There's 12 floors underground, 53 floors above ground, and it took 1.5 billion moves to build. A spanking new building finished just last year. Oh wow, it's like it's still brand new to this day and age. You could feel it trying to paint itself as a big player into the market, tired of being called an up-and-coming biotechnology firm. It was also convenient being close to Lunar University as well as the administrative sector. Now, Barton looked at me. There's a problem with the architecture. Why is that? I wondered how such a building could have faults. There stood a glass-lined building in full dignity, a symbol of wealth and success. It was a top-class enterprise which had hit sales volumes of 11.2 billion rubles in its 12th year as a company. Looking over reference data for investing didn't turn up any problems. It was a prime example of a stock with constant growth well into the future. You should know that Ringtech had its beginnings on Earth. It was located in Washington, and did you know its selling point was its freedom-filled corporate culture? Yeah. It was an adventure set up by researchers tired of the top brass at pharmacy giant Pifiz, whatever you pronounce, back in Washington. It was called the company where management and researchers were the closest. A freedom-filled research environment yields results, and they made a big leap patenting landmark advances in genome marking technology and bio-related test kits, and landed the big one with gene therapy drugs that came to the moon. In descriptions about the company, you'd always see the CEO in a white lab coat. Company cars were the same regardless of whether you were a normal employee or the CEO. The benefit packages were generous and there wasn't much classism. It was a wonderful place. The way Barton put it, it felt like there was something suspicious, different from what was being said by the company. I decided to ask, so it's not true? Outward appearances still appear that way, but look at the top part of that building. Sticking his head against the car window, he looked up and pointed at it. I also peered at it with him. The top floors have a weird shape, don't they? Yeah, they look like columns. Yeah, a cross shape? Yep, a terribly awkward shape. Once management starts feeling like they have special rights, most of the time new buildings will start getting distorted like that. Don't tell me. I ended up blurting out a line inadvertently. Barton chuckled with satisfaction next to me. Having a design like that serves to increase the number of corner offices. It's because higher-ups don't like having offices wedged between others. Furthermore, on the second floor of that section, there's that place where it's all just one piece of glass, right? That's a special employee cafeteria. Of course, it officially doesn't exist. I looked at Barton, dumbfounded. I asked him why. Why do you know this if it's not official? Just point a pair of binoculars over there during the day and you know. I guess that was true. But were there really people who do that? Of course there were. Here was one right here. When an enterprise which sells itself on the freedom of its corporate culture ends up doing this, the end was probably near. If they had originally been some bureaucratic-style company, then people working there would have already gotten used to it. A lot of people had gathered there because they didn't like that bureaucratic type of stuff, and so they'd really feel disillusioned. Thus, these researchers would eventually leave in larger numbers and even perhaps set up a new company. Therefore, things like buildings giving evidence to the rise and fall of corporations do exist. So if companies couldn't continue to operate long after setting up shop in said building and end up getting bought out due to having worsening performance, perhaps the superstitious would think that there was something with that building. However, the truth is different. Even if that building were to fetch a high price, there would be those enterprises trying to get in where management has similar lines of thought. A flag emblazoned with the company logo flew in front of the front foyer. People entering and exiting all appeared to be either hotshot businessmen or talented researchers. There wasn't even a hint that something was wrong. However, not being told what I was told, the shape of the building surely was unnatural. Furthermore, for there to exist a special employee cafeteria not known to the public, there had to be more lies and deception in the inner workings of the company. This type of talk would definitely not show up in the numbers. Once this actually showed up in the numbers, it would already be too late. Grasping exclusive information is a strength. I patiently await a chance to short sell among all the people idiotically trying to buy into the stock. However, without this information, I could only look at whether people were buying or selling and gather information from other numbers. Once there were a lot of margin buying or short selling laid on these stocks, you'd end up with a situation where regardless of whether it goes up or down, there'd be a huge amount of change. And if you misread it, Barton made a gesture as if he were slitting his throat. It's true that when you're trying to determine what to do based on market sentiment, in the long run, you'd end up 50-50. Even then, you'd have to keep your eyes peeled for hints and make a judgment based on them. I spend my days at work looking around at companies for patterns. Once I find a pattern, I try to figure out why that pattern exists. True. Most of the time it would be reflected in the simple emotions of the people. However, this is work that definitely cannot be done by a machine. Alright. I guess this is a good time for me to save here. So, next part, we're going to continue more of this. So hopefully, maybe we're going to see some sort of demonstration. So, like, comment, and subscribe, and see you then.